Hello and welcome. What if I tell you there's an easiest way to understand the hypotheses that guide your quantitative research? And what if I tell you that understanding the hypotheses that guide your studies shouldn't be so difficult like many graduate students often find it? Early career researchers and graduate students struggle a lot with posing hypotheses that guide their quantitative research, and this leads to lots of confusion. So in this video, I'm going to explain to you the easiest way to understand the hypotheses you are likely going to test in your own quantitative research following the demonstrations I'm going to provide in this video. Before I go on, let me explain to you that a hypothesis is simple. It is a statement of fact. It is a statement you throw out after you have reviewed extensive literature or theoretical assumptions that relate or guide or underpin the current study you are undertaking. So you don't just pose hypotheses from nowhere. It has to be from the variables of your study. And this is why I encourage you to sit relaxed and watch this video to the end so you'll be able to learn the best way you can quickly understand the hypotheses that guide your study. Again, through this video, you can also learn how you can quickly identify the specific objectives, the research questions, at the same time, the hypotheses that guide your research. So here, the topic exactly looked like a very simple title: Linear Regression, Leadership Styles on Organizational Innovation. So if I want to pose a hypothesis here, it's pretty simple. So I'm going to pose that, so I'm going to use a conceptual model, which is a brilliant technique that I find very, very helpful. Then what it simply means is that I'm going to have the linear line here drawn to this point. Okay, so let me quickly make this look black and white. So here I'm going to have leadership styles. Supposing I want to test these leadership styles as a single variable without any construct, maybe without any subconstruct first. Then I'm going to have organizational innovation here. All right, so here I've got just one independent variable and at the same time one dependent variable. So if you watch here, you see that I've got one hypothesis which says that leadership style would significantly impact organizational innovation. Okay, so if I draw this, so I just need you to understand what this means. Okay, so you can see that this is my hypothesis one. Now remember, there's something that you need to understand. If I pose a negative hypothesis here, if I say that leadership styles would not significantly impact organizational innovation, that means a null hypothesis. Or if I say that there would be no significant impact of leadership styles on organizational innovation, that is a null hypothesis. But if I pose that leadership styles would significantly influence or significantly impact organizational innovation, that is an alternative or alternate hypothesis. In most relationship research that requires correlation or regression analysis, perhaps linear regression. In this case, this is just a case of linear regression. You can check out my previous videos on linear regression, supposing you want to work on a research that has to do with linear regression. You can see that I've got just one conceptual model here which is guiding this study, right? And so this shows that this is just hypothesis number one. Any other thing that is outside of this is not part of your hypothesis, except if in your research, in the introductory part of your research, that you have other variables that you may want to test. So the hypothesis is exactly the way it is right now. So you've got only one hypothesis, and you also have only one research objective. So what it means is that you have that the specific objective of your research is that you want to test the impact of leadership styles on organizational innovation. And what will be the research question? The research question can be, what is the correlation between leadership styles and organizational innovation? So you see that everything becomes very clear. To make this pretty easier, so let me write them out for you exactly the way it is. So you have your specific objective. So this is to say that this research aims to examine the impact of leadership styles on organizational innovation, right? So this is your specific objective. So let me make it black and white so that becomes easier for you. 2, your research question. So you want to pose the research question this time. So that is, what is the impact of leadership style on organizational innovation? Again, your hypothesis would be this. So I will simply say hypothesis 1 would be that you can say there would be a significant impact of leadership style on organization. So this is exactly how you can see everything is exactly the same way. No ambiguities, no introduction of any other variable that is not part of your research. That's clarity of focus. We know what you want to do and exactly how you want to do them. So this is exactly what the conceptual model can help you to achieve. All right. So what happens when you have a sub-construct, when one of your variables have, tend to have one or more sub-constructs? Like in this case, we have leadership styles, and if we follow the previous theoretical assumptions by Bars and Bonds, you can see that the leadership styles have three constructs, which include transformational, transactional, and laissez-faire leadership. So what do you do when it becomes more complex this time? In this case, you also follow conceptual model. First, develop your conceptual model, and that becomes your guide. Any other thing that is not part of your conceptual model is not part of your research. You may have control variables, but make sure they are part of your work. If gender is male and female is part of your research, make sure you capture it adequately in the introduction. It might not appear on your research, but again, when you are developing the introduction part of your research, you can explain clearly that in this research, I want to introduce gender. Gender is a part of the research, okay? Or that in this case, the leadership styles has been decomposed into 3 sub-constructs following Bars and Bond 1985 and 1978. Now, in this case, what I'm going to do is that I'll still have to use the conceptual model again. Remember, this time we've got 3, okay? So, I'm going to do this way, paste. So you can simply, so this is going to be your guide whenever you are conducting your own research. Once you are able to get your conceptual models very clearly, then you are good to go. There will be no confusion, there will be no ambiguity. Nobody's going to ask you, where did you get the other variable from? All right. Then you have the third one, and then you've got your organizational innovation. Okay, so this is simple. You're going to have your conceptual model one, which is your specific objective number one, your research question number one, your research hypothesis number one. Remember what we did in the first one. Then this is your number two, and this is also your number three. So in this case, the research has now gone beyond simple linear regression that we did here. Now it has become a multiple linear regression, right? Now you can see, if I want to pose my hypothesis now, I will simply explain, I will simply call this objective number one. So each of these regression lines will guide you through in your quantitative research. Okay, so I've got this, and that. So let me make it more much easier. So this is your research objective number one, that you want to see the specific impact of transformational leadership on organizational innovation. Hypothesis number two would be that transactional leadership would significantly influence organizational innovation, or that there would be a statistically significant impact of transactional leadership on organizational innovation. Or if you want to pose the null hypothesis, in most cases, PhD students are required to pose null and at the same time alternate hypothesis. So if this is the case, it means that you can say there would be no statistically significant impact of transactional laissez-faire leadership on organizational innovation. I hope that makes sense. But if it's for research paper, all you need to do is simple pose alternate hypothesis. So in this case, this is also your research question one, and then this is your hypothesis number one at the same time. So these regression lines, these relationship lines, should be your guide in helping you to pose your hypothesis, all right, correctly. So with this, you will not introduce any other variable that is not part of this research. Not a part of this research. You don't have to introduce it into this study. The next one is, let's make it a little bit complex now. So I've got impact of leadership styles on organizational innovation, the mediating role of employees' psychological empowerment. And here I've got four subconstructs of the mediator variable, which is the employee psychological empowerment. So I've got four subconstructs based on extant literature. So it has meaning, competence, self-determination, and impact. So let me show you what you're likely going to do. Let me see. I'm going to copy this and see whether it pastes. Good. So now you can see that here, let me take out this. So supposing that you've got the mediator variable as a single variable right now, not like subconstructs for now. So what it means is that it's going to be employee psychological empowerment, okay? EPE. So let's represent that as EPE. All right. So let's assume that you've got only one mediator variable. You do not want to decompose it the way I've got it right now. So what do? You simply, again, let your hypothesis lines again guide you correctly. Okay. Remember that in a case like this where you've got the mediator variable, okay, that you need to first of all establish the baseline hypothesis. And what is the baseline hypothesis? Which is the main variable of your study, the core basic assumption of your research, the effect of the independent variable on the dependent variable. So you must have to first of all pose them. So those are your hypotheses 1, 2, and 3 in this case. So we're going to pose the first one to be transactional leadership, on the organizational innovation, and then we will still have these again, and then we'll still have these again. All right, so now, but we still have one more that is left. We still have to add this part. So in this case, now you have a so if you can drag it to this part so it doesn't get you more confused. So how do you now pose your hypothesis in a complex model like this? You will have to first establish the baseline hypothesis. The baseline hypothesis, very important. Then I will come here and explain that this is my what? Hypothesis 1, a specific objective number 1, at the same time research question number 1. So what will be my research question? My research objective, my hypothesis number 1 is going to be that so let me make it a little bit easier. Okay, so in this case you can see that you establish the baseline hypothesis based on what we did here, but in this case there are now mediators. So you have research objectives, research question, and hypothesis number 1, hypothesis number 2, hypothesis number 3. The baseline hypothesis, your hypothesis would be that there will be a significant impact of transformational leadership style on organizational innovation. That's hypothesis number 1. There would be a significant or statistically significant impact of transformational leadership style on organizational innovation. That is hypothesis number 2. Then you can also say that laissez-faire leadership would significantly impact organizational innovation. That can be your hypothesis number 3. Hypothesis number 4 here can be that transformational leadership would significantly predict employee psychological empowerment. Hypothesis number 5 would be that, so this is how you are going to pose your hypothesis. So each of these regression lines shows you the hypotheses as they go. All right, so you don't need to introduce anything that is outside of these your research concept. This is called conceptual model. So now that you've got mediator variable as 4 sub-constructs of employee psychological empowerment, what do? You still decompose that, right? So how to decompose that? It's pretty simple. I'll simply have these, okay? I'll simply have these again, or I can simply put them down and then put them down again, so so you have a very cleaner model. So how do I do that so it gets more complex this time? Now I can have these to this part. So each of these lines represents the hypothesis you're going to pose. Don't forget that. Each of these lines represent the hypothesis you're going to pose. Okay? They represent the hypothesis you're going to pose. And okay, so this part again. So you make sure that the hypotheses are correctly represented. And there's one more from here to this part. So you see it's getting more complex at this point. And then to this part, okay, we already got this. To this part, so you can see now we are getting more complex models. So then I can have this to be meaning. So I'm gonna have this to be competence, and I have this to be self-determination. Then I'm going to have this to be impact. Okay. So this is exactly how you can design. This is exactly how conceptual model can help you. So this can be hypothesis 1, 2, 3, or hypothesis 1A, 1B, 1C, hypothesis 2A, 2B, 2C, 3A, 3B, 3C, 4A, 4B, 4C, 5A, 5B, 5C, 5D. So as you want, all right, as you want. Again, let me also copy this and quickly show you the last part of the model. So in this case, that's a moderator variable here. Impact of leadership styles on organizational innovation, the mediating role of employee psychological empowerment, and the moderating role of organizational culture, right? Now I've introduced a moderator variable. And when I introduce a moderator variable, you can also use the conceptual model to again help you pose the hypothesis that you want. Now, if you want, you can simply, depending on what the literature says and what you want to study. If what you want to test is that you want to see the role of organizational culture, on the independent variables directly, then you can pose your moderator effects directly to the independent variables. So each of the independent variable, what is the role of the moderator? The moderator simply helps to strengthen the effect, the effect of the independent variable on the dependent variable. So if you have this complex model, now you can see that this can now be hypothesis number 6A, 6B, and 6C. This is how conceptual models can guide you to pose hypotheses. Having used the conceptual models to demonstrate how you can pose your hypotheses, when you conduct your research and find a statistically significant result, then you will accept the hypothesis. But if you do not find a statistically significant result, you will reject the hypothesis. So that is why I told you that a hypothesis is like a postulation. It's like making a proposal that X would influence Y. So when you run the hypothesis testing, after you have collected your data, and if the postulation you made is not true or cannot be supported by the data that you've collected, then you will reject the alternate hypothesis and then accept, the null hypothesis that it is not true. But if you do not have evidence, in this case you do not find a statistically significant result, that means you will now reject the hypothesis because you can't find an evidence supporting the postulations that you have made. This is the concept of a hypothesis. All right, so this leads me to the next video, which is about explaining the concept of statistically significant result. What is a statistically significant result, and what is the role of the p-value in helping you accept or reject a hypothesis? Thank you so much, and I hope you find this video helpful. You can share this video, you can like this video, you can subscribe to my channel. And if you are a graduate student who is having difficulty understanding his or her work, you can send an email to me or book a session that we can take time to talk about your research.